The following is part 2 of a series on a poem called Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. If you didn't listen to part 1, you might want to go back and check that out for any of the background information about the character of Ulysses from the Odyssey. If you're not worried about that, or you already know everything you need to know, then feel free to go ahead and start with this episode as we look at the poem Ulysses itself. Howdy, and welcome to the Preaching Poetry Podcast. The Preaching Poetry Podcast uses poetry to inspire conversation and to rediscover the world. Let's get to it. Welcome back. We're not going to read the poem again. Hopefully you listened to it the first time. It is a longer poem, and instead of doing this poem all over again from the beginning, what I want to do is I want to explain kind of my philosophy here. So with a poem like this, I would usually go through it in more depth, kind of line by line. But because this poem is longer, we're going to go over it in sections. So instead of reading the whole thing from, beginning to end again, we're going to go through them in sections. We'll read the section and we'll talk about that section. And we're not going to go over every single thing in the poem because, again, this is a long one. We're going to go over the things that I feel like are important or the things that are important to me. If I miss something big, please let us know. Okay, let us know. Reach out to us. Send us an email. Contact us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. And please, let us know if we miss something big that we need to talk about. Because again, this is not supposed to just be me pontificating. If you understand something else, if you've got some other idea, please reach out and let us know. So remember, we're not doing a proper analysis. We are going to talk about what motivates and inspires us. It's supposed to be about the human elements that we relate to as human beings, as people living our lives. So, let's get started with that first section. It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. So at the beginning of this poem, Odysseus's adventures, Ulysses' war at Troy and the Odyssey, these are long over. It has been years since he sailed the Aegean searching for home. He is an old man now and an idle king. It doesn't seem like there's really a lot to do as the king of Ithaca. He's an old man, and his wife is old as well. Their beloved home, Ithaca, is no longer this idealized vision of peace. The hearth is still. No fires are burning. The crags are barren, not fertile. There's not plants and green and things growing. And it's sort of this picture of the old age of death. Now, Ulysses is still the king. I mean, he does meet and dole unequal laws to a savage race. He says that they're basically, the people of Ithaca are obsessed with their basic needs and wants, and they never really look beyond their daily worries. He doesn't feel a connection to his people or a fondness for them at all. Nothing about his situation inspires him. Nothing is transcendent. He's never able to rise above the mundane, and he seems to think that his greatest days are behind him. Even the passion that he had for his wife and his son and his home, those all seem to be still, just like the hearth. And so Ulysses is an old man now, and he is facing his own decline, and he is facing an imminent death. Maybe not from sickness or anything like that, but from old age. He goes on to say, I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vexed the dim sea. I am become a name, for always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known. Cities of men, and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use. Ulysses is fed up with the life of an Ithacan king. He wants to be young again. He wants to travel again, to go places, to do things. He wants to drink life to the lees. What that phrase means, drinking life to the lees, this is why Horace told us to strain our wines, because if you drink life to the lees are the nasty, slimy, sedimenty junk that's left over at the bottom of your wine barrel. Okay? And so he says strain the wine so you don't end up with all of that nasty, bitter stuff. But Ulysses wants to drink life to the lees. He doesn't want to leave anything unlived, and he doesn't want to leave anything unexperienced. He says that he has enjoyed greatly and suffered greatly, and this monotonous, boring, basic life of an Ithacan king is not satisfying for him. He has enjoyed greatly. He has suffered greatly. He has enjoyed the company of valiant men, brothers in arms. Okay? And he has fought with them, bled with them, died with them. He has known the intimate love of not just his wife, but of many not quite mortal women. He has become a name. The gods know who he is. Okay? And he knows that he is famous. In the greater and wider world around him, people tell stories about Ulysses, and he knows that he is famous for his life and his exploits at home and abroad. He is a well-traveled man of the world, connected in the highest echelons of power and influence in Greek society. He has seen the world and walked the halls of power and been honored in those spaces, and Ithaca is just not enough for him anymore. Ulysses seems to feel connected to the places that he's been and the people that he has met, that their stories have interacted with him, and he's loath to just stay settled down. He thought that was what he wanted when he's sailing around for those years, when he's spending years trapped on Calypso's island. He wanted to be home, but now that he's been home for a while, the wanderlust is setting in. You see, all of those experiences have left him with this thirst to push the boundaries of what he has done and seen. I love the last line that we read there where he says, how dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use. So, for something to rust unburnished and not to shine in use, this tends to refer to weapons and armor. So if you have burnished bronze or burnished, a burnished sword or breastplate or helmet, these would be, you would have to basically kind of scrub the rust off. You'd have to get everything shiny and ready. You want your armor to look good, and you don't want it to be weak at any point, so you have to maintain it. And if you just let the armor sit there and you don't take care of it by burnishing it every so often and using it, then the metal will actually get weaker with rust. And so he says, I would rather, it's dull to pause, to make an end. I'm like, a set of armor. I'm meant to be used, not to sit on a shelf and rust. He's not happy retiring. He wants to continue to be useful and worthwhile. He wants to continue to be that name that he has become. until the bitter end of his life. You see, he's having what's not quite a midlife crisis. This is an old age crisis. And he is sort of staring at his own demise, at his own, imminent end, and saying, no, I don't want to go out like this. Tennyson goes on speaking for Ulysses, saying, as though to breathe were life, life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. And vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself, and this grey spirit yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. As though to breathe were life. Of course it isn't. Breathing is not is not living. Breathing is not being alive. Life is more than survival. It's more than just taking one breath, exhale, inhale, over and over again. Life is more than that. And we all know this. We all know that we need to do more than merely avoid death to have a life that is worth living for us. Our own sort of mental health, culture says this. We have to actualize ourselves. We have to have goals, and we have to have external things that we work for, that we achieve. We have to do the things that give us enjoyment and pleasure. We can't spend all of our time just focusing on preserving our lives. If we have to spend all of our time in that constant, just sitting there breathing, we're going to get bored and we're going to get depressed. And, that is not true life. And so Ulysses knows this, just like we know this, that we have to do more than merely avoid death to have happy and fulfilling lives. Ulysses says that life piled on life were all too little. He wants more than life piled on life piled on life. And he says little remains to the life that he has left. Right? He is aging, he is dying, death is coming. However, he says that every moment that he isn't yet dead is an opportunity for new things. He will not hoard his final years like some corrupt old miser, but instead he wants to follow knowledge like a sinking star. His spirit may be old and gray, but he still has a fire in his belly. He is still hungry, and he wants to continue to push the boundaries of knowledge and experience around him. He hungers and he thirsts for life, real life. And he goes on to reflect. He says, "This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I mine." And so we're reintroduced to Telemachus. If you don't remember, Telemachus was an infant, if even born yet, when Ulysses sets sail to go fight in Troy. And he is a faithful son who never gives up on his father, who is always looking for his father's return, even though he never actually knew his father until he was, 20 years old. Telemachus is this picture of, a faithful son, and it's sort of a miracle that Telemachus turned out to care at all about his father. Who knows what sort of work had to go into repairing that relationship? I don't know. But Telemachus was the faithful son who never doubted his father and worked hard to protect Ithaca and his mother Penelope while Ulysses was fighting and trying to sail home. And this is one of those things where he mentions his aged wife at the beginning, but he says a lot of fond things about his son here. It seems that Ulysses still has great faith and affection for his son. He has full faith in his son to be a good king. And he talks about his qualities to do these good works of sort of taking on the rule of Ithaca when Ulysses passes on. And so Ulysses seems to be hopeful about the kingdom and about his son being able to do a good job after he dies. He seems to be happy that his son will assume the throne. He loves his son. He trusts Telemachus to be a patient, determined, tempering influence on the people of Ithaca as their king. Telemachus is a worthy man. He's no longer a boy. He's blameless and centered in the sphere of the duties fitting for a ruler. He is good and useful, and he can mentor and disciple and teach others to become the same, right? Telemachus is tender, blunting the base and brutal nature of the common people. He's almost like a shepherd in that way, able to sort of, protect and lead and guide and take care of this, flock of sheep that's just kind of out there looking for their own needs, not really thinking about anything else. And yet he's also faithful to the gods, which was really important to someone like Ulysses, who definitely knows what can happen when you get on the wrong side of the gods. But Ulysses says that Telemachus works his work, and I, Ulysses, work mine. There seems to be this almost sorrowful distance between Ulysses and his son, that he's sort of happy for his son, but he is also sort of distant from him. Is it disdain? Is it disappointment? Is he disappointed with his son, or is he disappointed with himself? It seems that he respects Telemachus, but he doesn't seem to be very close to Telemachus. Ulysses goes on to say, "There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine, and opposed free hearts, free foreheads, you and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with the gods." The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. So after reflecting on his son, now Ulysses reflects on his ship. He was a man well acquainted with sails, with sailing, with being on a ship. He was a skilled sailor. It seemed like the things that really threw him off were things like acts of God. Those seemed to be the things that would destroy and damage his ships. And even the cannibals, they didn't manage to capture all of his ships and sink them all. Anyway, Tennyson, in this poem, though, seems to forget all of those sailors who sailed with Ulysses died. So, in the Odyssey, Ulysses makes it home alone. None of the men who set out with him, none of his sailors survive. Remember, some of them die from cannibals, and then the others, they barbecue the sun god's cows, have a grand old barbecue, and as they're trying to get away and maybe avoid the wrath of the sun god, he destroys the ship sinks, all of Ulysses' sailors die, and he washes up on Calypso's island. So it's interesting to me that Ulysses, here he thinks back to his sailors, and so there's two ways to look at this. Either Tennyson is just ignoring the fact that those men all died to further the narrative by giving a sort of people that Ulysses does feel close to, by sort of putting them back into the story, taking a poetic license here. And that could be the case. It could also be that Ulysses here is just crazy. he's just lost it and he's talking to ghosts. That could be possible too. And, either one of those seems to be fair representations here, but regardless, Ulysses addresses his sailors in this poem. And whether he's doing that because he's sort of a crazy old man, getting so old that he's blurring the lines between reality and his memory, his past, or because Tennyson wants there to be an audience, I don't know. What do you think? Let us know. Remember, email, social media, lots of ways to get in contact with us. Feel free to discuss these things. Anyway, so we're going to pretend, at least for now, that these sailors do still exist. But if they do, they're all old. And he says that they're worthy of honor. Old age is worthy of honor, but it also has a toil. You see, being old comes with privilege and honor, but it also comes with drawbacks. It is hard to be old. And Ulysses goes on to tell them that, death is imminent, but it is not here, yet there is still time. And if anybody would have the stones to spit in the eye of death, it's Ulysses and his crew, right? They battled the capricious gods and the Trojans and the elements, and they managed to succeed. Ulysses stares out to sea, watching the sun setting, the moon rising. Poetry, am I right? The symbolism is poignant, though. Okay, it's important to see that he says the long day wanes and the slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. It's a picture of the sun setting, the moon rising, of life coming to an end, of a day coming to an end. And he says, "'Tis not too late to seek a newer world." It's not too late to find something new to see, to find new experiences to live, to find new knowledge to learn. And after exhorting them that it's not too late, he says, "Push off, and sitting well in order smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." See, Ulysses aims to set sail again. After all these years, to once again chase his destiny and his fortune on the sea. And that last little chunk that we read, in my mind, that's some of the most beautiful words put together in the written English canon. To sail beyond the sunset and the baths of the western stars till I die. You see, he's going to set sail out into the world that they don't know as well. The sort of Eastern Mediterranean is kind of self-contained, but if you get out past the Western Mediterranean, you're out in the Atlantic Ocean. And so he's sailing westward towards this Atlantic Ocean, towards the vast expanse of water that nobody has successfully crossed. It is the unknown. It is the picture of the end of the world, at least to him. He says that he may die at sea, or he may finally reach the Blessed Isles, right? So the Blessed Isles, or the Happy Isles, were the place that, the best of heroes could go. So if you were just a normal person, you would go to Hades and you would die, whatever. There was Tartarus, right? The pit where, you'd be tortured forever, kind of like hell. But then there was Elysium, which was reserved for righteous heroes. It was a place that you could go in the afterlife, and you could enjoy the life and honor worthy of a hero. But the legends of Elysium and the Blessed Isles kind of change over time. But the idea was that if you could live 3 different lives, you could make it to Elysium, they let you go back. And if you could live 3 times and make it to Elysium all 3 times, you got to go to like super heaven, right? The Blessed Isles. And so that was rumored to be out in the west, out near the end of the world. So far away you just couldn't sail there on accident. But he says, no, we're going to sail it. And we may die at sea, or we may actually reach the Blessed Isles. Or maybe, no matter what, he'll reach the Blessed Isles. You see, Odysseus was a hero. So whether he dies and gets to the Blessed Isles that way, or whether he sets sail to get there, he wants to go. He's tired of being in Ithaca. He wants to go to Elysium. So he aims to go and join the great hero Achilles, also famous for the Trojan War and the Iliad. Okay, Ulysses would have been very familiar with Achilles. They knew each other well, didn't always get along. And he says, though much is taken, much abides. That which we are, we are. And this is a powerful reminder to himself and maybe his crew that we are never totally used up. That time cannot take his glory from him, and it cannot take his sense of self from him. And though much may be lost as he grows weaker through time and fate, his will is strong. Much abides, much remains. And he says, that which we are, we are. This is a sort of proto-Victorian ethic. We've talked about this, though this poem was published before the reign of Queen Victoria, so I don't know if you can call it Victorian. But, by the time we get to the end of the poem where he says to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield, with the strong will, right? By the time we get to the end, we're moved to empathy with Ulysses, and almost inspired. Like, we might want to hop on that vessel, and we might want to go with this famous captain on his journeys. Well, now what? The poem is over. So, do we admire Ulysses? I mean, yeah. Don't you? We all seem to admire someone who won't just lie down and die, who wants to live their life to the fullest, who wants to continue to be useful, who doesn't just want to retire and have like a second childhood. That's admirable. That's worthy of respect. Even if a guy like Ulysses, if nothing else, he earned that sort of happy ending, but it wasn't enough for him. And I think we'd admire him even more if he's successful in this trip, right? To go on to have, another successful round of journeys at the end of his life. Oh. I think we definitely ought to admire Ulysses, and we ought to learn from that sort of spirit and that sort of will and that refusal to let old age rob him of himself and his purpose. But I think we can also level some pretty honest and pretty fair critiques at Ulysses. This is not a poem that I simply sit down and say yes and amen to. I don't do that. Because there's a lot in this poem that I think we have to really stop and think about. When Tennyson writes about it, it's beautiful. It's inspiring. But if we stop and think about it for a minute, not all of it really makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't all fit really well together. Okay? Remember, Ulysses is a king. He has a responsibility to his people, to the island nation that he is the chief executive of, and yet all he can really think about is himself. He seems to hold his people, the people he's supposed to be serving as king, in contempt. And he is very, very much concerned with himself, selfishly obsessed with his own, self-actualization, about getting what he wants out of life. But he's not concerned at all with the flourishing of his wife, The hearth is still. There's no affection left at all in that relationship. That's a tragedy. He's also not terribly concerned with doing right by his son. Now, I think that finishing your life well and not curling up and dying or retiring to live in a second adolescence, I think that that's important. I think it's important to live life in every stage of life to its best. But the self-centeredness in this book looks like an obsession with glory, and to any objective outside observer, this whole thing looks like folly. You have a sort of rickety old man setting out on a dangerous, unnecessary journey for personal satisfaction and leaving behind his wife, his son, and all of his responsibilities. That seems like a tragedy at best and a dereliction of duty at the worst. And we also need to talk about the character of Telemachus, because he gets mentioned quite a bit in this poem. He's sort of the foil for Ulysses. He's the one who is happy with the life of the Lord of Ithaca. He's the one who wants to be here, who's good for the people, all of those things. But he is not the one he's not that romantic hero like Ulysses is. He's not looking for more, looking to get the most out of life, looking to make a name for himself and make a man for himself out of his experience. He doesn't set out like his father did to become this, sort of heroic figure. He just kind of stays at home. And this is maybe a controversial take, but there are a lot of people these days who kind of agree with me that Telemachus is the real MVP. Okay? And that honestly, I think that he's the person we should look up to in this poem. I think we can learn from Ulysses, and I think we can be motivated and inspired to him. But if you had to choose one person in the poem to be like, don't choose the old man who doesn't know when he's had enough, who wants to set out on a selfish journey of self-actualization. Choose Telemachus, the real MVP. He is dedicated to his family. Okay, he cares for his mother, and he fights to keep his father's throne, even when his father is not gone and he doesn't know him. He is dedicated, and he does his duty to his family and to his country. In the Odyssey, Telemachus actually goes on a pretty dangerous journey of his own to go to Sparta, to talk to King Menelaus and to talk to Helen, because he's trying to figure out what happened to his dad. All these other Greek leaders made it home, not terribly long after the Trojan War ended. They all got blown around off course, but eventually they managed to get back to their kingdoms, but not Odysseus. And so Telemachus sets out looking for his son, not his son, his father. Telemachus sets out looking for his father, and it's a dangerous journey because, on his way back, he has to kind of dodge suitors who want to kill him and ambush him along on the way. And when his father returns, he's right there with his dad and a handful of other guys, and they fight. You see, Telemachus is not a timid little boy. He's a man willing to fight against great overwhelming odds. Like, they were really outnumbered significantly. He's not a weakling. In fact, I feel like in this case he's more mature and responsible than his father. And I don't mean to downplay Odysseus's own sort of his own, successes and his own strengths, but Telemachus seems to be worthy of a lot more respect. See, Odysseus, even in the Odyssey, he wants to get home, but he indulges in all of these affairs with these mythical, magical women. But Telemachus seems to be faithful to his family. Odysseus was not. Ulysses, is only concerned with himself. Telemachus is concerned with the people. that he is supposed to rule over as the heir apparent. You see, Telemachus is better suited to be king than Ulysses is, and even Ulysses seems to think so. You know, in the eyes of his own father, he is beloved and respected. In Ulysses' own words, Telemachus is well equipped to do the most important work that a king can, building a society with justice and peace, smoothing out the rough edges of his people. So let me ask you this, if you're still not convinced with me that Telemachus is the real MVP. Who would you rather have be your king or your boss? Who would you rather have be your king? Ulysses or Telemachus? You might say Ulysses. You might want to go on that trip with him. But if you're not interested in chasing the Blessed Isles, if you're not interested in chasing experience and knowledge and setting out to sea because you just can't be happy with what you have, because you can't be content with the good life you've got for yourself, if you just have to have more, well, I can see how you might want Ulysses as your king, but man, like if I got to choose somebody to be in charge of my city, my state, my country, I would rather have the guy who is less concerned with himself and more concerned with the people that he's supposed to serve. I think we can admire Ulysses and hold him up as the great hero that he was, but we cannot afford to be blind to his flaws, and we cannot imitate him without discernment, lest we cause a lot of suffering and pain for the people who love us. Telemachus was said to be discerning to fulfill the labor of a king. And I think that's what we ought to aspire to as well. Not just to seek knowledge, to seek life, to seek real life, but I think we should also be discerning to fulfill the labor that we have been entrusted with. Because while some of us may have the means and the methods and the opportunities to go and just chase experiences and live our lives for our own sake, I think that there is much more honor and dignity in someone who lives their life to serve others. Thank you for listening to the Preaching Poetry Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed your time with us, and we look forward to having you back for more. If you like what you heard, please be sure to leave a review and don't forget to subscribe. If you're looking for more content, you can find us on Apple, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, basically anywhere you find podcasts. If you want to join our community or just want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Preaching Poetry.